Happy Independence Day from London. I'm Juliana Olayinka, coming to you from the Channel's television studios here in the UK. During this special Nigeria Independence Day recording, alongside my panel of guests, I'll be delving into a series of topics that have led Nigeria to the point she's at today, and we'll explore suggestions for ways to move forward. Joining me in the studio, preventative terrorism expert and president of the Africa Security Forum, Temitope Olodo, and lawyer and the founder of the Global Strategist Peace Initiative, John Essin. Welcome to you both. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
As Nigeria clocks 59, our increasing influence on the world stage is undeniable. On the sidelines of the recent United Nations General Assembly, tackling insecurity in Nigeria became a crucial talking point. A UN spokesperson said the country's multiple security problems have created a crisis that requires urgent attention and, if not resolved, could lead to instability in other African countries. Delegations from the European Union and the United States also weighed in on the sentiment, calling for an immediate solution. Temitope, for an immediate solution to what?
To the security crisis. Unfortunately, we have a country of over 120 million people. And
120 million? No, some say 200 million.
200 million. 200 million, I mean, sorry to say. But everybody's their own security manager. You know, you provide your own water security, your own energy security, your own personal security. The roads are not safe. People are not safe. Perception of violence, extremism is high. So there is a need to review our security infrastructure in such a way to boost community confidence in policing and in the integrity of our security. That is important, and we need to do something about that.
Well, some hard, cold facts there. Yep. Well, some would say they're facts, some say they could be arguable. But, John, you can't argue with the fact that Nigeria has faced a decade-long insurgency in the northeast of the country. Where would you say we are with that now?
We haven't gone far enough because the government hasn't done enough to change the situation. There's not enough frontline personnel. There's not enough military. You don't have enough personnel for the law enforcement institutions and the wider intelligence community. And even the ones we have are not properly trained. So we have to, first of all, boost the numbers, but train them as well to engage insurgency, because the rules of engagement for insurgencies are completely different from the rules of engagement for conventional warfare. And what the military is deploying at the moment are methods for conventional warfare, not an insurgency, which is why we keep seeing the failures, the blunders by the military.
The UN wrapped up recently. Agnes Callamard, she's the UN Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial summary or arbitrary executions. She said Nigeria is a pressure cooker of internal conflict. What does that mean?
What that means is that when you look across the spectrum in terms of different ratings on violence, extremism and terrorism, Nigeria is just up there, breaking all the scale. Yeah. When you talk about the Global Terrorism Index, we're number 3. When you talk about the Global Peace Index, we're number 148 or 49.
Africa never fares good in those indexes, though.
No, but we could, because there are things that we could do that we could change. We need to move away from the analog way of doing things to a technological approach. Why should it be that it's Boko Haram that will start using drones that our kids used to play on the streets of London in order to survey places to know where to attack? Why is it that Boko Haram could attack venues and disappear like Stargate, as if they have, a gigantic a black hole that they go through?
They're well equipped, too well equipped.
They're not equipped. They're not really equipped, because all you need is to have a containment strategy. The challenge we have is that the president needs to move away and find or create a security advisory council where people that have expertise and knowledge of things that are modern could give him advice.
They did that with economics recently, isn't it?
Yes.
So you're calling for the president to do something very similar, but with security. Perhaps
yeah, with security.
We'll get a call. John, we spoke about Boko Haram. Do you think the government are being honest about what's happening? Because recently, you know, I've read reports, most of us have read reports about NGOs now being silenced almost, or being debuffed and discredited. And of course, there are some international journalists that have put out some horror stories about what's going on. Of course, we don't know if they're true or not. They're only allegations. But do you think there's an air of mystery or communication that's not filling through into exactly what's going on in that part of Nigeria?
The reason there's not enough communication feeding through, but the reason it's not feeding through is because the government is restricting the flow of information. Amnesty International and other watchdogs have criticized the military, especially for human rights violations, a lot of abuses, even by the military in the IDP camps and in the target communities where they're meant to be protecting the communities. Now, that fits into Boko Haram's narrative because they want to protect the communities as well. So if you have the military who is supposed to be protecting you, attack you, and deploy aggressive, repressive measures just as an excuse to fight Boko Haram, then you take...
There's a tension, isn't there? There's a tension between, you know, the layman and the military, and that's obviously another thing that needs to be resolved. Timmy, let me bring it back. We're in London. Yeah. Of course, we're members of the diaspora. I remember years ago, a lot of my friends, you know, would be scared to go to Nigeria. Yeah. They'd be scared because they were like, oh my God, you know, all I hear about is armed robbers, kidnapping. Are we going back to that place?
We're likely to go back to that place if we don't put in place the appropriate measures to address it. And going back to what Mr. John said, and he's spot on, he's right on that, the fact is that we don't have job descriptions for the security agencies. We don't even know what they're doing. We can't measure them. How can you not measure people? If you are able to measure them, we're able to say they've moved from point A to point B. All we're saying is...
Well, they have targets. Come on, let's not be too tough on the military. Of course there's a strategy. The fact that, you know, Boko Haram are deemed as one of the most serious, dangerous terror organizations in the world. There's no way that the Nigerian military do not have a strategy to try and combat them.
And I will ask your viewers, you know, to Google Nigeria and, type in Nigerian counterterrorism strategy or Nigerian anti-violence strategy.
Is that supposed to be public?
Yes, the UK's one is published. That's why we know about what is called context. And I worked in that environment. All the documents that we used were in the public domain. Australia's one is in the public domain. South African one is in the public domain. Why is it that all the presidential white papers are never seen? They're recorded, they put together, but never seen. There's a lot of Nigerian security officers that are coming to the UK, America, and producing excellent documents. In fact, top on their class. Where are all the researches that they're doing? And why is it that we're not implementing them? We have a system where even the recruitment strategy of the military is stuck in the 19th century. Now in the 21st century, they're still recruiting for cooks when they should be recruiting for people that are coding. They're still recruiting for people that play drums when they should be recruiting computer analysts. There are more than 1,000 Nigerians that work within the Metropolitan Police. I don't work there. I'm not working there. But why is it that we're not using any of those people to help to improve our policing? Why is it that we're not using any of our Nigerians? And I know a lot of them. They are my friends who have been to Iraq, they've been to Afghanistan, they've done war tour. Why are we not inviting them in? Even if you don't want to pay them, invite them in to advise you. You see, that is the difference between a country that is serious about tackling violence extremism and a country that is just playing lip service on dealing with crime.
Well, they may be playing lip service, but it's I'm sure Nigeria definitely want to sort this issue out. And this is one of the reasons we're talking about it today. Tony Topper mentioned getting some expertise from the diaspora. They would say it's very easy for us sitting in London to say that. But, you know, the UN, you know, part of some of their sideline discussions, the US got involved, the EU got involved. Nigeria is still a very important country. The stability of Nigeria is the stability of the continent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do we need the US? Do we need the EU to step in? Is that the only solution?
We don't necessarily need them. It depends on the level of what they intend to contribute, because you have to take some responsibility yourself. I mean, as a Nigerian, you are more likely to have the will and the commitment to serve a Nigerian cause. But if you're an outsider, no matter how much money you're paid, there's a limit to what you can do. So we need to train Nigeria. Tourism is a global phenomenon. Everyone suffers from it. See, if I'm American, I'll pay my first attention will be to an American or to the American country than to Nigeria. So we should try and train Nigerians, like Terry Tokwe was saying, to some of them are abroad and they have some of the skills. We should try and recruit them in the hope that they will have the will as Nigerians, they'll have the commitment, the patriotism, like you find in other countries, to help Nigeria.
We're wrapping up this topic. Tell me, what are some of the ways forward in terms of security? Is Nigeria safe at the moment in terms of its history? Where would you place Nigeria in 2019?
As we are 59 years down the line, Nigeria needs to have improved better than this. But the president is doing a lot to improve things. And I'm not saying that Nigeria is all dark and gloomy. There are places in Nigeria where you have more Rolls Royce than you have on the streets of London. So Nigeria has that money, we have that wealth, we have the people, we have the
capability.
And we have the capability to deliver. We only just need to come together. I don't know, many of your viewers will have watched Nigerians singing out their item, and I felt like crying. A lot of people cry when they saw that. That is the kind of thing that unites us, our unity in diversity. And we could do it. All we need to do is bring our head together. And I know we could do it. There are places in Nigeria that are safe, that you could walk the street, and there are places in Nigeria that are not safe. All we need to find out is what are the parameters, why is the reason why they're like that, and then just make sure we put in place measures to measure and address those issues.
Well, coming up, as Nigeria turns 59, what lessons must be learnt from our colourful past? See you after the break. Welcome back to this special Nigeria Independence Day show from our London studio with me, Juliana Olayinka. Joining me is preventative terrorism expert and president of the Africa Security Forum, Temitope Olodo, and lawyer and the founder of the Global Strategist Peace Initiative, John Essin. Welcome back, guys. Let's change gear. Before the break, we were talking about security, but I've got to talk about a very important topic, important because of the number of people it involves, the youth. When are Nigerian youth going to take an active role in politics? I'm not talking about too young to run. I'm talking about you've got a stake in this. Yeah,
I think gradually they are taking a stake. We know based on the UN report that by 2030 we're going to have about 260 million Nigerians. 150 million of them will be Nigerians under the age of 25. So there is need for Nigeria as a nation to ensure that the youth are involved, I think, in politics. And there are ways in which we could do it. When I was growing up, even though born here, and I went back home, we studied politics. We did civil and all those things. And I think now we need to ensure that kids are taught their history, taught about why they should be proud about the Awos, the Zik, and the others. And I think that is where we need to get to. They are politically aware, but actively involved in politics is a challenge for them now.
When you say they're politically aware, some may dispute that. Does politically aware mean you've been shared tons of messages on WhatsApp or something's trending on Twitter and you're able to retweet that? Because a lot of the stuff that's shared on social media is fake news. We know that. This is not a Trump quote. Many of us in the media and experts like you guys know that it's fake news. So it doesn't mean because you're constantly having your thumbs on your phone that you're aware of what's going on politically. John, I would argue that many youth are not aware of what's going on actually, and they're right.
I agree with you, Julia. I don't think they're very aware of what's going on. But what concerns me the more is the nature of politics in Nigeria and the role models that showcase politics. So what are they buying into? If you want them to be more involved in politics, what kind of politicians are they looking up to emulate?
What would you say is, how would you describe the climate of politics in Nigeria? What does it look like?
It's institutionally corrupt. The personalities in politics need to do a lot more to change the climate so that the youth buy into something that can give us a legacy going forward. But at the moment, I'd rather they didn't buy into politics as it is at the moment, what it represents, unless they know enough to be able to change it.
You've mentioned, Temi, you referred to that UN report, which I found really, I found it frightening. And I'm sure a lot, when it came out, the headlines really were lavished in horror.
Yes.
Purely because it's Nigeria's already tight.
Yeah, it is.
And, if they're saying it's going to increase by that much,
Yeah.
we've got to invest. There's things that we have to do for these youth. But how do we engage them? Constantly now you're seeing women doing everything and anything
Yeah.
to make money.
Yeah.
You're seeing men involved in cultism.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because of social media, but it seems to be more and more, that this is occurring. Abroad, we're seeing loads of stories about how our young men and women, as soon as they leave the shores, are getting caught up allegedly in fraudulent activities and drug circuits. What is it going to take to engage their mind?
There is a lot that needs to be done, and this is where you need to have a plan. If I was advising Mr. President today, apart from having a youth minister, you need a minister to deal with poverty elevation. Because
We have something similar to that.
oh, we're talking of a country where over 100 million people are in advert poverty. If people close their eyes and think of the United Kingdom, that everybody's going to sleep at night and nobody's having any meal. The whole country, as they switch off their light at night, 9 p.m., nobody in the whole of the United Kingdom is having a meal. That is serious. So you need to change that. And that's the reason why we might talk about politics from now to tomorrow. If somebody offers you 5,000 naira, you will take it when you've not had food in your tummy. But if government put in place initiatives to help people that are coming out of school, it's not necessary to get government jobs or to empower them to be able to do something, empower the youth. And some politicians are on record to say, we don't need to empower people because we want them to vote for us. So we as people, the youth need to now take up the tax themselves, not only to just feed themselves with information, but find out how they could use their shared numbers to change the politics.
And it's all about the numbers, isn't it? It's a numbers game, this game of life and politics.
Yeah.
But John, I don't want to get into philosophy, and it may sound like a philosophical question, but just listening to Temi's description there of just how many people are living in, just shocking poverty. Why? Why is it so difficult for the government, the previous administration to tackle this?
I don't want to be unnecessarily hard, but it goes back to the successive governments being institutionally corrupt. It's just a case of being opportunistic, self-serving, self-indulgent opportunism. That, when I get there, I'll take as much as I can, stay for 4 years or 8 if I can.
See, a lot of people would think that, but then what we're realising, and I'm sure we've all engaged with government, is that they want to do good, but something happens along the way. Is it the system? Because most people that get into government are there to serve, because it's not an easy environment. Well, I would like to think, John, that most people are getting into. So something is happening along the way. There's an error, isn't it? It's like, an input, and then something is happening that we're not seeing, and it's just not coming out.
I think we must give it to the president because he's doing a lot in the area of corruption, tackling corruption, and trying to address this. So they must inject anti-corruption incentives to help people. So if people are working, you must be able to say, okay, let's give this incentive so they don't, get corrupt. So for police officers, if you finish your work after 30 years or 40 years, there's a house, there's a pension, there's a house waiting for you in your homeland, so in your place. So when somebody offers you that 5,000 naira, you're saying to yourself, if I collect this money, I'm not going to get this thing because if I get sacked. We need to start teaching corruption in school. We need to insist that anybody about to take up public office must get a certificate in anti-corruption practices.
Wow.
No, let's do that. Let's make sure that we say to people,
what is that endemic? This is fundamental.
No. We're seeing people filling out forms for their, their declaration, and they're projecting their wealth ahead of them getting into office. So if let's teach them like kids. If they want to be taught like kids, let's say to them, this is corruption. This is what it means not to falsify your document. This is what it means when you're. I don't go to my member of parliament's house in London to go and stand in front of his house to ask for money to go to the clinic, because I know if I go to the clinic, I'll be taken care of. I don't go in front of my member of parliament's house to ask for money for my school fees, because I know the school is there. And that is what should be happening in Nigeria. When you put in the money there, nobody will be coming in front of your house to say that we elected you, you've not given us our court. So once we start dealing with that, let's teach our kids. Because do you know, in school, children are paying for their dissertation. Children are paying their teachers for them to pass them. People are paying in order to be to sit in a car. People are paying extra in order to sit even in a plane that they paid for already. People are paying extra in order to get a passport. So corruption is there, and if you don't, you can't just withdraw.
It's got to be rooted out.
To root it out, you need to inject an anti-corruption initiative in there to help people to be able to balance, because they're used to corruption.
Perhaps that's the way forward. Let's change the gear again.
Yep.
Let's change the gear again, because we're celebrating Nigeria today, and we're having this discussion because all Nigerians, even those of us that are not on the continent, in the border, we do want the best for Nigeria.
Definitely.
And John, I've got to say, there are some stories you hear. That somebody shared a story to me recently of a young Nigerian boy that he got a calculation that even his Oxford professor had never seen before. We're doing that, aren't we? There are Nigerian individuals around the world that are making us proud.
Absolutely. And to go back to what Femi has been saying about the president, I don't want to leave him out of this. I think he's doing a lot. I just think that to a degree, there's a lack of understanding of how to move the country forward. Because I had I think it was in December of 2017, relevant government institutions voted, authorized a $1 billion payment to fight Boko Haram. Fighting Boko Haram should actually address the structural level facilitators of the conflict, which includes economic disenfranchisement. There should be jobs. Political marginalization, which the youth have been kept out of politics for a long time. Social isolation, even the environmental degradation in the Niger Delta area. I know they came to a cessation of hostilities of sorts a few years ago, but those structures.
It's wider. It's not just. It's not the one. It's not the one topic.
Yeah,
is it?
Absolutely.
Temi, I'll give you the last word. Something. Let's try and end on something positive.
Yeah. You can't just not talk about the good things that Nigeria is doing.
We can't be written off.
No. We're talking of a country where the diasporas contribute more money, in terms of remittance than crude oil, over $20 billion. We're talking of, you go on your Facebook page and you see Nigerians banging first class. We have Nigerians in every sphere of walks of life. Nigerians are good people, great nation. And that's why every time, you hear that, arise, O compatriots, it makes you feel so proud to be a Nigerian. And even our young ones now, they're being stopped in school and asked, where are you from? They say, I'm Nigerian, even though they've not even stepped that country. And that tells you about the beauty of Nigeria. And I just want to thank the Nigerian government and thank the Nigerian people. And I say, happy anniversary.
I think that's such a brilliant way to end it. John Esin, Temitope Olodo, thank you so much for joining me on this special show. Sadly, that's all we have time for today. So from London, I do hope you've enjoyed this discussion. And most importantly, I hope you've enjoyed your Independence Day celebrations. Until next time.